All right, so prior to break, we were talking about properties of parallelograms, and the first thing I want you to do is just recall that every parallelogram has 5 properties, and I've already listed them for you, but basically both sets of opposite sides are parallel, both sets of opposite sides are congruent, both sets of opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary, and diagonals bisect each other. So today we're going to narrow this focus down a little bit more, and we're going to talk about 3 very special parallelograms. The first one is the rhombus, and the rhombus has 3 properties. So it's got your original 5 plus 3 more. And those 3 properties are 4 congruent sides, diagonals are perpendicular, and diagonals bisect opposite angles. All right, so what do those properties mean? So the first one's pretty easy. So we know it's got 4 congruent sides, so all 4 sides are going to be the same. Its diagonals are perpendicular. That means the diagonals make a right angle right in the middle, so all 4 of those angles would be right angles. And the diagonals bisect opposite angles. So that means that this diagonal here, so if I look at this diagonal here, then this angle and this angle would be the same, as well as this angle and this angle would be the same. So in other words, it cuts both of those angles in half, so all 4 of the angles on the same diagonal would be the same. So it also means that obviously these 4 angles would be the same. So those are your rhombus properties. Okay, the rectangle has the original 5 properties plus 2 more. So on a rectangle, we know it's got 4 right angles and its diagonals are congruent. So what that tells us is that all 4 of these angles are going to be right angles. Having a little bit of an issue here. So all 4 of these would be right angles, and its diagonals are exactly the same. All right, now the square is extra special. So it has the original 5 properties plus all of the rhombus properties plus all of the rectangle properties, because a square is both a rectangle and a rhombus. So it's both a rectangle and a rhombus. So it gets all of the properties. All right, so what that means is that all 4 sides are going to be the same. It's going to have 4 right angles. Its diagonals are going to be congruent and perpendicular. And every single angle has been cut in half. So since every angle's 90 cut in half, that means each of these small angles here are going to be 45 degrees. All right, so here's how that's going to help us. So when we look at this first example, it says ABC is a rectangle. What does that tell you about ABCD? So basically, we said that a rectangle has the original 5 properties plus 2 more. So just by saying rectangle, it's going to tell you an enormous amount of information. All right, so I've listed all of the properties that you know just because we know that that shape is a rectangle. So we know it's a parallelogram, opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary, diagonals bisect each other, diagonals are congruent, and it's got 4 right angles. So the benefit to these properties is that once you know what shape it is, you can figure out what properties you have and you can use it to solve problems like in example 2. So in example 2, it tells you it's a rhombus, and it's dealing with the sides of a rhombus. So we've already talked about a rhombus has 4 congruent sides, so we know that those 2 pieces have to be equal. In other words, 5y minus 6 has to equal 2y plus 3. Subtract 2y from both sides, add your 6, and then divide by 3, you get y is 3. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying it's got 4 congruent sides, and that's how you can use it. Looking at the next shape, so this one is a square, all right, and it's also dealing with sides, and we know that on a square, all of the sides are equal again. So I'm going to concentrate on the letters that match. So I know that 4x minus 22 has to equal 2x plus 4. Subtract 2x from both sides, add 22, and you're going to get 2x equals 26, and then divide by 2, you get x equals 13. Okay, the same thing works with the y numbers, so I'm going to change colors here so that it's different. So I know that these 2 have to be equal, so 5y minus 15 has to equal 3y plus 3. Subtract 3y from both sides, Add your 15, you get 2y equals 18, and then divide by 2, so we get y is 9. So I was able to use the properties of the rhombus and the square to solve those two. All right, for example 3, we're going to decide what parallelogram this is. So is this a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square? And we're going to decide why using its properties. So on the first one, I notice it has 4 congruent sides. So that means it's either a rhombus or a square, but looking at that, it does not have right angles. So this does have to be a rhombus, and our reason is it's got 4 congruent sides. Okay, looking at the next one, I see it's got 4 right angles. That is definitely not a square, so this is a rectangle. And the reason is it's got 4 right angles. All right, now this one's a little bit trickier. We know this is a parallelogram from the directions, so I know opposite angles are congruent. I know consecutive angles are supplementary, so 180 minus 90 tells me that this angle is also 90, which means this one is. So again, this has 4 right angles. The sides are not all the same, so again, this is just a rectangle because it's got 4 right angles. So example 3 is going to be very similar to 1 through 4 on your homework. You're going to decide if it's a rhombus, rectangle, or square and explain just like we did in example 3. All right, example 4 that we're about to do now is just going to be like numbers 5 and 6 on the homework, so it's definitely worth taking a look at. So we know that these are rhombuses, so we're going to use those properties to our advantage. So on a rhombus, we know that consecutive angles are supplementary, so that means that these angles have to add up to 180. So 180 minus 73 tells me that this angle right here is 107. Now, on a rhombus, the diagonals bisect opposite angles. So bisect means cut in half. So if I take 107 divided by 2, that tells me that each of those angles are 53.4, and every angle on the same diagonal has to be the same. So what that tells you is that all 4 of those angles are going to be 107 divided by 2, which is 53.4. All right, now the next one's a little bit different. So we still know that we're finding all 4 angles. And on this one, the first one that I see is angle 2, because on a rhombus, we know diagonals are perpendicular. So that means that this angle in the middle has to be 90 degrees, and that means all of them will be 90 degrees. Okay, anything on the same diagonal, except for that middle piece, is going to be the same number. So angle 4 has to be the same as the 52. And then that means we only have one more to find. But if I look at this shape here, this is a triangle. And we know a triangle adds up to 180. So 180 minus 90 minus 52 tells you that our missing angle down here is 38. And everything on the same diagonal will be the same number. So angle 3 is 38. And that makes angle 138. So again, those are like examples 5 and 6 in your notes. All right, now this one's going to ask us a little bit more information. So this is dealing with a rectangle. And it's asking us several questions about the rectangle. So the first question is GH and GK. So those are just the sides of your rectangle. So if I look at GH, the top, I know the opposite sides match. So GH has to be the same as the bottom, which is 8. And then GK has to match the side over here. So I know that that means it has to be 5. Okay, now the angles are a little bit more tricky. So we have several angles here to find. We've got to find angle 2. We have to find angle G. We have to find angle 3. We have to find angle 5. We have to find angle 6. And then we have to find angle 7. All right, so the first thing I see is angle G. So angle G is this whole angle here, which we know is a right angle, so it's 90. Angle 2 and the 44 add up to 90, so 90 minus 42 tells you that this angle is 48, so again, a pretty easy one. Angle 7, I can see that that's vertical, so those have to be equal. These are a linear pair, a line pair. That means they add up to 180, so 180 minus 84 tells you angle 6 has to be 96. And that leaves 3 and 5. So 3 and 5 are a little bit trickier, other than the fact that the top triangle here and the bottom triangle here are going to be exactly the same. So angle 3 has to match the 42. And then the two side triangles are the same. So angle 5 is going to match angle 2, so it's going to be 48. So those are isosceles triangles and they match. The last question tells us that, I'm going to erase all this stuff I put on here real quick. All right, so the next question says that GM, this piece right here, is 7. So I know since diagonals are congruent, that means JM also has to be 7. And if those two pieces are both 7, when I add those together, we should get 14. All right, on example 6, it's dealing with the two diagonals of a rectangle. The diagonals of a rectangle are equal, so I know I just need to set these two equal to each other. So 4x minus 7 equals 2x plus 11. Subtract 2x from both sides. Add your 7 and divide by 2, so x equals 9. So this problem is going to be similar to what you're going to do on 14 and 15. Example 5 that we did earlier with the rectangle is going to be like 9 through 12. So these are very similar to what I'm going to be asking you to do on the homework. The last set just says what is the most, like the best name for that shape. You don't have to explain, but we talk about it anyway. So for A, I see that it's got 4 congruent sides, so we know that this is a rhombus. And then if I look over there at part B, this one's giving you the 4 congruent sides, but it also gives you the 4 right angles. So this one is a square. And that is going to be like problems 16 through 18. And then for 19 through 24, you're back to properties, just using the properties. So for 19, it's a square, you know opposite sides are equal. 20 is a rhombus, you know opposite sides are equal. 21, it's a rectangle, you know the angles are 90 degrees. 22 is a rhombus, you know the sides are equal. 23 is a rectangle, you know the diagonals are equal. And 24 is a rhombus, and you know that its diagonals are perpendicular. For the bonus question, you will have to use substitution and set opposite sides equal to each other. So this video has went through each problem on the homework to kind of give you some hints. If you have any questions, please reach out.